Quorum is present.
Thank you, Don. First order of business is the approval of the minutes of October 27th. They have been distributed. They are in your packets. They are on page 3.
Move to approve, Carlson.
Thank you. Mayor, is there a second, please?
Jacobson, second.
Mr. Jacobson, second's been moved and seconded. Approval of this can be a voice call vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is the approval of the order of the agenda. It has been distributed. It is pages 1 through 2 in your packet.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Is there a second, please?
Second, Costin.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 4 is the approval of the bills. Mr. Kent Costin, City of Fargo.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Pretty short bills listing and no unusual vendors on the list. Total bills to be approved, $4,777,676.45. I have no comments on the bills.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions of Mr. Costin? May I have a motion, please, to approve? This is an actionable item.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
Second, Carlson.
Mayor Carlson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Costin for $4,777,676. John, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
yes,
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn. That was him who joined. Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 5 is a financial report from Mr. Kent Costin, City of Fargo.
Thank you. Referring to page 14, we'll start there. With regard to the spend in 2021, we have $102,058,791 and a project to date total of $748,450,283. And if we go to the next page, the statement on net position, we have $100,774,695 in the face of the financials. I had just one comment to share there. You'll see a very large P3 reserve fund, $16,125,733. The fiscal agent dispersed this funds to the Bank of North Dakota pursuant to the Master Indenture of Trust Agreement and as directed by John Shockley. So that was a large transaction that went out in October. And just to point that out, and as that agreement continues to mature, you'll continue to see additional funds under that category, cash held in the trust at the Bank of North Dakota. So I just wanted to point that out. And then moving on to page 16, the annual spend or the current month year to date, we're clearly under budget overall, so there aren't any real issues to report there. Other than that, the other reports are there, and if there's any questions, that would conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Questions? Any questions? A motion, please, to accept the financial report.
Jacobson moves to accept.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Is there a second, please?
Steen seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. It's been moved and seconded to approve the financial report as presented by Mr. Costin. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson. Yes. Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 6 is the Executive Director's Financial Report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All this pulled up. So this is very similar to the last few months. No major issues in any particular budget category for FY21. As this was supplied, you'll note there is continued to be a majority of our expenditures under the lands program as we continue to move through property acquisition for the Red River Control Structure, Drain 27, and other properties related to the embankment. So probably don't need to take much of your time, Mr. Chairman. If there's any particular questions that any committee members have, I'm certainly available to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Finance Committee, is there any questions of Mr. Paulson on the Executive Director's Financial Report? This is for information only. Is there any other questions? Item number 7 is the contracting actions. Again, Mr. Paulson, Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 4 contracting actions before the board here today. I'll probably do the HMG ones together. So the first 3, task order 01, task order 101, and task order 102. Oh, I'm sorry. The first one is for program services. So I'll take the HMG ones together, but the first one is for program advisory services. That is for Mr. Nicholson's role as the Deputy Executive Director through 22. So any questions on that initial contracting action?
Questions for Mr. Paulson?
Joel, who is the consultant?
Martin Nicholson.
Oh, okay. Are we still having the coach? Are you still having your coach as well or no?
For the executive coach?
Yes.
No, that is not before the board here today. So we have existing contracts for Mr. Mel Nelson that are ongoing through the end of 21.
I was just curious on his scope of what he's doing. Has that changed at all? Because I know at one point he was going to help us with the governance. Is the scope of his practice or scope of his consulting going to be less or more this year?
Oh, I would anticipate it would be less, Your Honor. So with the inclusion of Mr. Schatz on the governance side, he's really running with a majority of that scope of work. And then the other services that we had been using Mr. Nelson for will probably, for the most part, be concluded very shortly.
Thank you.
Chair Dardis.
Please.
Mr. Paulson, the program advisor services, does that include anything for Mel, or is that exclusively just for Mr. Nicholson?
The program advisory services is for Mr. Nicholson only.
Right, so they're 2 separate entities, and we don't have the other one in front of us today. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The only item for consideration today is for program advisory services for Martin Nicholson's time as the Deputy Executive Director.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Additional questions on task order 01? Please continue.
Chairman Dardis. The only thing it seems like the amount compared to what Joe's getting paid on an annual basis is must include expenses or other things as well, does it not?
That is correct, Your Honor. It does include travel expenses that are included in that cost, as well as an hourly rate for Mr. Nicholson.
Joe, I appreciate that you were honored, but just because I went to court, you can still call me Tim or Mayor.
Mr. Steen has a question, has his hand up.
Just want to be
I
formal,
was just-
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Steen.
I was just curious, Mr. Chair, if you would like to take this separate from the HMG ones. Approve this separately.
I would like to approve this separately, yes.
I would move to approve Program Services Advisors LLC Task Order 1 Amendment 4 for $500,000.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second?
Second, Mahoney.
Mayor Mahoney seconds, been moved and seconded. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Paulson, if you'd please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next two, I think we could probably take together because they are related to the same contract work that we've been working on with HMG for the last few months. If you recall, I did report to the Finance Committee a few months ago that we would be engaging HMG to reduce their 36 open task orders down to 2 task orders or a handful of task orders. And the intent of that was really to reduce administrative burden in administrating all of the 36 open task orders and combine like scope together under a larger heading, and then manage the scope under subtasks within these larger task orders. So we did just that. We did, if you did notice in the contracting actions that were sent out to the Finance Committee a few days ago, there was a lot of unencumbrance related to the 36 task orders. A lot of that was just cleanup work, taking things out that are no longer necessary as we went through the exercise to combine HMG's scope into these larger task orders. I'll also note that this is through the duration of construction, so through 2026. However, we have implemented a mechanism to take these year by year, so they will only be allowed to continue work on particular scope items that are scheduled in the cash budgets for those particular years. And so we will be able to make some adjustments as we move forward throughout the years. That is consistent with the other large consultant task orders that we have on this program, the Jacobs and the AE2S task order. So with this action here today, the recommendation to the board for tomorrow would be to execute these HMG task orders consistent with the consultant task orders that we have at the DA.
Mayor Mahoney, you have a question?
And, sir.
Mr. Paulson, the only question I have on this is when I was talking to more engineer people, they were talking about D3 bringing increased cost. Does this have any inflationary factor in it, or is this straight what we've previously negotiated?
So this is what we negotiated here is based off of the amount of anticipated work in each one of the years at the hourly rate that we currently have with HMG. There is provisions within the master service agreement for HMG to request hourly rate increases on an annualized basis. That request does require justification for increased overhead or rationale or reasoning for that rate increase. And so the current task orders are based off of the existing hourly rates. If those do change, there would be some minor adjustments related to that in the future.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Paulson on task orders 101 and 102?
Move to approve, Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Been moved and seconded to approve task order 101, the amendment 1, and task orders 102, amendment 1 to Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That's everyone.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Paulson, item number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 4 is a master service agreement. So currently this is not a no-cost request of the Finance Committee and the board. This is for the services of Mr. Michael Klein. He is currently working for the program under a sub-consultant agreement with PR for Good. We would like to direct contract with Mr. Klein for his services. We do not have that scoped out at the moment, but towards the end of the year, the PR for Good contract will run out. And so we will need to work with Mr. Klein to scope out his services for 2022 on the program. And this MSA would allow us to engage in those conversations. So certainly open to any questions related to the MSA before you.
Questions for Mr. Paulson? Again, we're on the master service agreement, consulting services.
Chairman Dardis.
Mayor Mahoney.
Can you just remind us, where is Mr. Klein's resident, this gentleman that's outstate?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Mahoney. So Mr. Klein does work out of his home in Iceland, and we do utilize him for communication support services related to our communications program.
Additional questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, Mr. Peterson.
this is Chad. Mr. Paulson, I thought part of the PR for Good programming was specifically with the intent, and this is why I'm asking the question, to pursue additional resources, meaning federal dollars or some other avenue for funding. Is that not the case, or is it purely comms? And if it is the case, have we had any progress towards that?
Commissioner Peterson, apologize, but I'm making an assumption here. I'm assuming you mean Luceo. Luceo is contracted to provide sustainability and program-related services related to grant funding through FEMA, EPA, HUD, and others. And they are currently working on that. Mr. Klein has been working for PR for Good, which has been a communications support consultant that our communications program has been using in 2021. We are very pleased with the work that Mr. Klein is doing, and we feel it is more appropriate to direct contract with him for services related, instead of going through a sub-consultant arrangement, which has a bit of markup on it. So.
Yeah, Mr. Paulson, yeah, you're spot on correct, but that's why I was asking the question. I thought he had some sort of, whether it's subservience, for lack of a better term, towards supporting the sale, but that's not the case.
That's correct. He does work with Luceo on some items as far as grant writing and how we put together our approach and the language. But by and large, it's more related to communication support services for those tasks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Mayor Mahoney.
Joe, could you just, I don't know his body of work. What have we seen that he's done? Is there some type of communication thing we've seen as a board? Or some communications that have gone out by the diversion that we've seen?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor Mahoney. So every press release that's come out in the last 7 months since we've contracted with Mr. Klein has had his touch on it, as well as many of the news articles and magazine articles, such as the ASCE article that appeared highlighting the program at a national level. And so he provides that level of support for us to write that content, review that content, and provide kind of the strategic direction for the production of that content.
And
So
then
most
you
of
have,
that comes out as FMDA, but it's all been run through Mr. Klein prior to being released.
and when you were going through some of the requests for next year and people, it seemed like Jennifer had 3 positions. Are any one of those positions going to supplement what Mr. Klein does, or are those going to be separate?
Those positions are anticipated to be separate, Mayor.
We have an additional question with Mr. Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joel, just a question here, because we don't have much in the master services agreement. Do you anticipate this being an hourly contract or a retainer type contract?
This would be hourly. So Mr. Klein currently works under an hourly rate, and he will honor that rate as we go through this change with the MSA versus the subconsult agreement. But we were paying a markup on Mr. Klein's hourly rate under PR for Good, so this would eliminate that.
All right, thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Steen, you still have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it down, but it's not working. So just ignore it.
All right. Again, the discussion item is the master services agreement that we have with Michael Klein. Are there any other questions? To the Finance Committee, this is an actionable item. A motion, please.
Move to approve, Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Carlson. Is there a second, please?
Reed, so second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Don, would you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
No.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Redlinger,
No.
Mr. Steen,
No.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
And we do have 6 yeas, 4 noes.
Thank you, Don. Motion passes. Again, there's no, that will be coming back before us once in future meetings. Item B is the DA approval of the 2021 cash budget changes. We have nothing to report. Joel, do you like to make any comments?
Yes, Chairman. So we brought this before you a few months ago. Since that time, we've had more clarity on tasks and items for 2022, as well as some anticipated expenditures that were to occur in 21 that did not occur. And so we'll be transitioning those expenditures into the 2022 budget. And so I believe we have provided a line item listing. I've also worked with Chairman Dardis and Vice Chair Mr. Steen on some of these changes as well. I do have Martin Nicholson on the line as well if we have any in-depth questions on any particular line item. And so I'll probably just pause there and allow the committee to ask any questions with any of the budget adjustments for the draft 2022 budget.
I'd remind the committee that this is the final draft budget. It's not an actionable item today. We wanted to have you have some time to review it. So are there any questions that for Mr. Nicholson or Mr. Paulson? It's page 88 in your packet. Any questions on the 2022 cash budget? Hearing none, we're going to move on to the DA board approved MOUs and agreements actions. Mr. Shockley.
Sorry, I was getting, Mr. Chair, I was getting my speaker off of mute. So we have two MOUs before the Finance Committee today. The first is with the City of Comstock and the Diversion Authority. You'll recall back last year, the board approved a settlement agreement with the upstream and the other parties to the litigation, which included the City of Comstock and the City of Wolverton, and also the upstream Wilkin Richland County DA. As part of that settlement agreement, the Diversion Authority agreed to enter into an MOU with the City of Comstock to address a couple of items related to the project. The first was some lagoon rehabilitation, some storm drain improvements, and then some work regarding some road work that was being performed by Clay County and the City of Comstock. And so this MOU was really contemplated in the settlement agreement. Myself, along with the DA staff, met and worked with the City of Comstock. It was a very good discussion, very reasonable, and we were able to work out an MOU pursuant to that settlement agreement, and are putting it forward to the board for final approval. And the second item is we're finally getting the last couple of MOUs, third-party agreements through that involve utilities that cross the diversion channel. And so Casserole Water Users District has multiple small lines and larger lines that cross the channel right of way. And this MOU is being entered into for the purpose of addressing those utility crossings and relocations along the diversion channel. A lot of work and time went into this. Really have to compliment Chris Bockyguard on his dedication to getting this task done, as there was a lot of meetings with Casserole Water. I'm happy to answer any questions, but really both of these items are pretty straightforward, as they're tasks that we had, the authority had previously agreed to, either through the settlement agreement or through the project agreement when we bid it out, that we would get the utilities relocated.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there questions for Mr. Shockley? Mr. Shockley, would you like these items to be considered both at the same time, or would you like them independent?
I'll leave that to the discretion of the chair, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll do these individually. Well, first on the City of Comstock and the Metro Flood Diversion Authority MOU. Don, would you please call the roll on this first item?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure we got a motion yet.
Oh, my apologies.
Mahoney moved to approve. I'm glad the chairman wants to move the meeting along.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second?
Steen, second.
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Been moved and seconded to approve the City of Comstock and the Metro Flood Diversion Authority MOU as presented by Mr. Shockley. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Is everyone?
Thank you, Don. The motion passes. Item 2 is the Cass Rural Water Users MOU. Do we have a motion, please?
Jacobson, motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Is there a second, please?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Been moved and seconded to approve the Cass Rural Water and the Metro Flood Diversion Authority MOU. Any discussion on the motion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes,
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
How's everyone?
Thank you, Don. Motion passes. Is there anybody from the Finance Committee that has an item that they'd like to bring forward at this time?
Mr. Chair, I had one minor update, very minor update.
Please, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let everybody know we are working with the North Dakota Public Finance Authority regarding the distribution of the bond proceeds from the North Dakota bonding bill that was passed earlier this year. The one thing that I wanted to note is that in our conversations with North Dakota PFA, that there is not going to be, does not appear to be a cost share or reimbursement agreement that is required. And so the approvals that have been occurring for the cost share with the city of Fargo and Cass County Joint Water Resource District likely won't need to occur with those funds. So just more of an update for information.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any other item by any member of the Finance Committee? Our next meeting will be December 15th. We have no further business. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.